Welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker live event. We are so excited that you're joining us. Thank you for choosing to spend some time with us today. We're going to let people roll in for just a couple of minutes. And while we wait, let's all meet each other. So go to the chat box and make sure that you set your settings to panelists and attendees. We want everyone to be able to see your messages, and tell us your name and your role, and drop your LinkedIn link if you want to. So this is just one of the fun parts of showing up live, getting to interact with other attendees. So we want to meet you. And also, if you've got a question for the panel, put that in the Q&A box. So that way it's easy for us to grab it. We want to pull in your questions as we're going. We want this to be super interactive. So please drop any questions that you have for us in the Q&A. And today our topic is around AEs doing cold outbound, why they should, how to make it easier for them, and a lot more. But you are not here to hear from me. So I would love to do a round of introductions for the incredible panel that is here today. And then I'm going to turn it over to AJ, who's going to be facilitating some really cool discussion today. So Jillian, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here. Would you introduce yourself to the crowd?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jillian Clancy. I am the Director of Sales at LeadIQ. I help out with our commercial sales team, our mid-market sales team, and our account manager team.
Amazing. Thank you for being here. Corey, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Corey Bray. I'm one of the co-founders of CloseLoop. We're a sales consulting firm. I've written 8 sales books. If somebody wants one, you can send me a message and I'll mail you one. And I'm also the co-founder of Coach CRM. A software company was founded 15 days ago, and we're doing live daily updates of behind the scenes of an early stage startup. So that's what I'm up to.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Corey. And Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Rob Beatty, Head of Sales Acceleration for Modernizing Medicine, company that we sell software to doctors' practices. Do a lot of different things, but primarily responsible for a lot of the top of the funnel activity. So I head up and lead our SDR team, and then work on how do we get all those more opportunities in everybody's hands. Prior to that, worked for a company where I had a bunch of full cycle sales reps as well. So SDR team, full cycle sales reps. So a lot of history doing all of this kind of thing we're going to talk about today. Looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Amazing. Yes, it's going to be super fun. Thank you for being here, Rob. And AJ, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. AJ Alonzo, I head up marketing at Demand Drive. I actually used to be on the sales side of things. I crossed the picket line, so to speak, about 3.5 years ago, and went from sales to marketing. So currently I help support our SDR function and AE function. So I'm going to be talking a lot about how marketing can work with sales to make all of this a whole lot easier.
Awesome. Thanks, AJ. I'm super excited that you're going to be facilitating the conversation today. And before I turn it over to you, you'll see we just launched our first poll, and I just shared the results up here on how many hours a day do you make phone calls to prospects. And it looks like, yeah, I'd love to get y'all's reactions, and I'll turn it over to you, AJ, first, and I'm going to go ahead and also launch the second poll.
Awesome. Yeah, let's get a quick reaction to poll number 1 here. Less than 1 kind of took the cake, and then 1 to 2, it's descending from there. Personally, a little lower than I expected. I don't know, panelists, what you all think, but less than an hour of outbound prospecting calls a day doesn't seem like, to me, enough to fill your own pipeline. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I look at that, and it's honestly, it's going to sound weird. It's not that surprising to me. I think that prospecting is something, especially over the last 24 months, that has whittled away in the amount of time that people are doing it. And the piece that was in there is about phone calls. I wonder if we had said, how much time are you spending doing digital prospecting and that kind of thing, if you would have seen slightly higher results. But yeah, it's I think it's probably pretty typical.
Corey, what do you think?
Well, I hope these people have full pipelines. If you've got a full pipeline, spend 1 hour a day. That's pretty good, because if you're
Good point.
doing business meetings all day, you're doing discovery calls, you're moving into demo, you're going to proposal, you're managing legal and all this type of stuff, and you carve out an hour a day to do prospecting, you're rocking. But if you're sitting there and your calendar looks like the Sahara Desert, then you're probably not doing what you need to be doing, and maybe you need some time management work. That's what I think.
Jillian, do you agree?
I do, but I would say there's two buckets for prospecting. It's like the research and the execution, and the execution can be a lot of different methods. So I'd want to talk to those reps and see like what other methods they're doing. Depending on their ICP or what they're doing, it could be that they need to meet them through a different method. But I still think if that's how much time you're spending on prospecting alone, probably not enough.
Fair points. Yeah, I think you all brought up the sort of the crux of what we're talking about today, right? The fact that if AEs are responsible for filling their own pipeline, there are a lot of ways to do that. You don't just have to do cold outbound calls to make that possible. So it's going to be circumstantial for sure. Looks like results for poll 2 just came out. How much of your pipeline are you responsible for sourcing? That's actually a little surprising to me, that 50% or more is as high as it is. I know a lot of organizations still rely heavily on SDRs to do a lot of that work for AEs to provide them with those leads to make sure that their pipeline stays full. Corey, I'll start with you this time. What do you think? Are you surprised by these numbers, or?
Yeah, I mean, if the AEs are responsible for more than 50% of pipeline, my question is, what's marketing doing? Because marketing has millions of dollars of budgets for ad spend. They've got campaigns, programs, trade shows, different managers at different levels, content, all of this stuff that you can do. And then the salespeople, they say, oh, you can take people to a steak every now and then, but don't order the wine because that goes over your expense budget. So I think in terms of investing resources in people who are responsible for bringing in leads, a lot of companies should probably re-examine that and realize that, yeah, they're spending multi-million dollars over here for some of the digital and event type work, and then they're expecting someone to sit behind their desk and call strangers and do just as much. If that works so well, why isn't everybody? Why don't you just put $1 million on more people to sit behind their desk and call strangers?
Great question. Jillian, what do you think? Do you think are you surprised by any of those numbers? Do you think that sales should be more responsible for a majority of their pipeline?
I'm not necessarily surprised. I think it's siloed based on like the stage of the company, the ICP. There's a lot of variables that go into this. I think when you say how much of your pipeline, I've always coached my teams to have 3 times the amount of their pipeline open on any given basis. So, especially at like a run rate for the quarter, to try to have 3 times the amount open. And I typically will coach them that they should be responsible for a third of that. Plus it's at the end of the day, it's their pocket. And so, if they're putting the work in and they know that they're sourcing the pipeline that's ultimately going to feed them, be what they close, that's kind of how I think about it. And then, the other 2/3 from marketing and the SDR team as well. Hopefully, what Corey said should feed into that.
Rob, how do you think sales reps should split their pipeline?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because it's so subjective on how somebody views what is needed in their pipeline or what that looks like. I'm in complete agreement with both of you, right? If you're responsible for that much, are you not receiving any help from anybody? If you're responsible for so little, are you taking enough responsibility for what's out there? And to me, it sort of comes down to the question of, at night when you're done, are you going home and saying, man, I have to do more? Or are you saying other people aren't doing enough for me? And it sort of comes down to it's a strange mental balance, right? But I will tell you, if you're probably blaming somebody else, you need to take more responsibility for yourself, right? That's kind of what it probably breaks down to. But yeah, it's a very interesting poll. I was sitting there staring at it, just trying to digest what really it might mean in today's world, because I see there's some comments already about how hard it is to get people on the phone, and have people not necessarily given up on prospecting, but are trying to find different ways, and therefore, just to Jillian's point, just never having enough pipeline to begin with, right? Like, is that an epidemic that we're facing right now in sales? And it probably is. I think most reps will tell you they don't have enough opportunities, and they become very desperate to get the ones that they have as a result.
So I think what you've all talked about kind of realistically sums up the point of the conversation today of, are we making it easy enough for AEs to do that work, to build those relationships and to fill their pipeline themselves? Balance being sort of the operative word for a lot of this, because as an AE, and I think Corey, you brought this up, they're responsible for a whole lot more than their own outbound prospecting. They have to close deals, they have to do contract management, they're nurturing these opportunities deep into the funnel, and balancing those activities, their job as an AE with cold outbound can be difficult. So where are AEs realistically falling short? And Corey, I'll toss the question over to you because I used you as an example, but are there any specific instances where you've seen AEs just not being able to do X, Y, and Z, and that's like the linchpin for not filling their pipeline well enough?
I think it's less about AEs and it's more about the organization and how they enable them. So I'm a big fan of W. Edwards Deming, who says that 94% of problems come from the system, 6% come from the individual. And so when we think about how, my company, we've got 3 AEs, and what we've decided to do is enable them to the greatest extent possible. So they don't do research for data. We have a full-time data researcher. You call her SDR, research analyst, whatever you want. So my AEs are not looking through and trying to figure out who they should call. They've got phone burners, so they're not dialing. They click a button and it just dials and dials and dials and dials and dials. And then we've also got subscription to another service. I'm not going to drop names, technology names today. Another service I pay $4,000 a month for that goes out and figures out who's more likely to pick up the phone. Because do I want to save $4,000 a month and have all my AEs sitting around doing manual research all day? Or do I want them to sit down, dial, have conversations with people, and then go work deals? And so I think it's about a combination of data and technology enablement. Last thing I'll say on that is that the types of people that want to have phone calls with strangers are not the types of people that want to sit behind their computers and do research. There are some people that are okay doing both. There's very few people that love and are great at both. Role specialization. We have it in marketing. Marketing roles are specialized like crazy. And then when it comes to sales, it's like, oh, go get them, Tiger. You got to do everything.
That's a good point. Yeah. Rob, what do you think? Are you on the specialization train, or are there other aspects of this that maybe you aren't seeing AEs do that that they can improve upon to help fill their own pipe?
Yeah, no, I think Corey's dead on with process matters a lot. And how do you have those specialization by task? Are you asking your AEs to sift through a bunch of stuff to try to find that one person to have a good conversation with? And so are you not enabling enough at-bats? Like, do you have poor data? Do you have poor leads? Do you have an administrative burden on them? So I think looking at all of that is incredibly important. Is it necessary stuff that's leading to those good conversations, or is it just things you put in place at some point that mattered at a time that now maybe changes? And so, I'd look at a lot of organizations and say, you're putting more roadblocks in front of your people than you should be. And really question, is that blocking them from doing what they do really well? When we were talking a couple of days ago, AJ, we were talking about how back in the predictable revenue, which is sort of the book about how Salesforce built their engine that changed the way and started getting the idea of the specialization by task. It made a lot of sense then, and it still does, but there's this sort of belief that AEs are going to be able to go out and talk to their clients and get people that way. And strangely enough, I think we've taken that away from a lot of them. So the specialization has positives and negatives, right? So if I'm with Corey, I don't want to sit in front of a computer all day doing research. If I want to go talk to people, I prefer talking to people. You have a generation of sellers now that are coming up that are used to screens. They like to sit behind the screen. That screen is a comfort zone. They've had them like here their entire lives. That's more comfortable to some people than having a conversation, right? Corey's doing it right now. And so checking that out too. I think that's important. Like, are you looking at the process by which your AEs are acting every single day? And are you looking to take out those obstacles and put them in a position where they have the most bandwidth and most time for the most difficult thing, but yet the most important thing, having a conversation with somebody about how do you disrupt their status quo to get them to think about changing whatever it is you want to sell.
Well, that's a good point. You're hiring AEs and full cycle reps so that they can do the thing that they're meant to do, which is close deals. And if you put all these roadblocks in front of them, it's like, why bother? Jillian, you head up a sales team, you're director of sales. Do you see a lot of organizations, like Rob was saying, sort of falling short in that regard, or what else can they be doing to sort of eliminate those roadblocks and help their AEs actually do the thing that they've been hired to do?
Yeah, I would say, to me, it's always, it's not a one size fits all. Specialization might not work at every stage for every company. It's always been a matter of making sure that they're set up for success and continuously doing check-ins about like what are the blockers, and then coming up with solutions for those blockers. Like, what other departments can take the burden of those blockers away? Can someone else be doing this role so that the team can be focusing on selling? It's like Jeb Blount's fanatical prospecting, like platinum hours, golden hours. It's making sure that you're focusing on the right things at the right time, and getting rid of the noise. It's kind of how I've always thought about it.
Yeah, I won't lie.
AJ, one quick stat. I was texting with my buddy who's the head of sales the other day, and we were talking about this. And he said someone on his team the other day, they did 600 dials, had 20 conversations, set 4 meetings in one day.
Wow.
I talked to people who their reps might not make 600 dials in a month.
I was going to say that's
$90,000
tall number.
Data, tools, execution, and you get the people that can execute there. Look, there's a great use case to have junior sales development reps on your team. Creates an awesome talent pipeline for folks. But if the organization is starved for meetings, get your star players equipped with the tools where they can just go out and get it, and let them be the ones that are doing it. But they're not going to sit there and manually dial 15 dials an hour. It's a complete waste of time.
Yeah, I will say as someone who, and I mean, I've hadn't been doing this for forever, but like I started back as an SDR in 2013, and looking at all of the technology and processes, and really even just like how we've built the role for SDRs and AEs now compared to then, which is only 8 years ago at this point, it's night and day. I physically picked up a phone 75 times a day to hit my number. And now there are reps at Demand Drive that don't ever pick up the phone because they just have to touch a button and that's all done for them. I think when I first saw this question, the thing that kind of pinged to me and something I heard in all three of your answers was time management is really kind of the big thing here. That if you're an AE and you are spending a good chunk of your day doing contract negotiation and all the stuff that you're supposed to be doing, can you find an hour or two in your day to actually do outbound cold prospecting? And if you can't, is it because you actually don't have those 2 hours, or because you're filling your time with things that you shouldn't be, that you could be filling your pipeline with? What do you guys think about that? Anyone can take that one and run with it.
Well, and if you're doing tons of time with contract negotiation, that means that either your terms are onerous, and so you got people pushing back on terms, or your packaging's off, and so you've got to renegotiate packaging. If your packaging's fair and your terms are fair, that's fairly straightforward, not a huge time suck. Still happens, but that's my point on that.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that is the big question. And you talk about time management. I know that we're coming out of 24 months of big change to everybody's world, and in that time frame, we've added a bunch of meetings, and life creeps in a lot differently than it did. I mean, it used to be, you talk about the old dedicated to picking up a phone. I used to have to go to an office, right? How weird does that sound, right? But I would, and there would be other people there. And it was great. And there's a lot of things I miss about it. But what's happened is you get this kind of time has eroded. So I suspect most people are productive for far fewer hours a day than they used to be. So that contract negotiation, that may be about the same length of time it was before, but I'm not spending a half hour talking to my kids when they come home from school that I was doing, before in the office, where I didn't have that opportunity to do that. So, I challenge a lot of people that I talk to, take a look at your calendar. What are the meetings you've added just to add, or meetings that you had that aren't necessary anymore? Or are there pieces of your day that are infringing on it? And if you go to, Jillian alluded to Jeb Blount's book, which is, I think, one of the best books about this thing ever written, find that time where you can block that time where you're dedicated, but be prepared when you get there. Don't do your research during that time. Do your research at some other times. I think we all probably have 2 or 3 meetings during the week we can multitask on, right? Do your research then. Don't tell anybody I said that.
As a hater of multitasking, that kind of that got right under my skin. But I mean, you're probably right. There are reps out there who are sitting in some kind of forecast review with their team. Somebody else is the focus of attention. It doesn't hurt to pop up in a LinkedIn search and grab a few contacts here and there. Jillian, when you did bring up golden and platinum hours and Jeb's idea, it struck a chord with me because I literally talked about this with my AE like 2 days ago, and I introduced him to the idea, and he came back to me and was like, "Yeah, how could you not find like 2 hours in your day to do this?" Can you expand a little bit more on golden hours and platinum hours and like what that might mean for someone who doesn't understand the concept and how that kind of relates to the discussion?
Totally. I'm gonna miss the punchline about which one is which, though. I'm like racking my brain trying to remember.
Platinum's definitely better than gold.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
you would
That's
think
what I
that,
thought.
but I thought golden was
I'm like, which one is
revenue
this 20
generating and
hours?
platinum is non-revenue generating.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know what he's doing with his
someone read the-
nomenclature here.
Yeah. Oh well. I mean, essentially, the whole point of it is 1, be prepared. 2, manage your time correctly. And 3, it's like put your blinders up. Actually, the thought of someone else, like someone doing something else during a forecast meeting, made my skin crawl a little bit, because I think that's such a valuable time for everyone to be together and like work on deal progression and to like focus on it, because I think that information will like disseminate into everyone else, and then they can go execute on it on their own pipeline. But I would say it's just for prospecting, for deal progression, for closing, like whatever you're doing, set that time out for the week and put your blinders up and do that thing, and you'll do it really well. And instead of taking, maybe 3 hours to kind of laissez-faire work through prospecting, you can probably execute, a couple 1.5 hour blocks throughout the course of the week and get the job done. To me, that's always like, that's been my takeaway about those two things. And I'll tell my team, some of you are morning people, some of you aren't. So maybe the morning is when you do the research, or, you listen back to your calls, or whatever is going to help you. Or maybe the morning is when you should try to stack all of your calls because you're going to be on your A game, and you should have your deal progression and closing calls then. That's how to think about it.
Yeah, if you can get in the habit of scheduling deal progression and close calls, that will enable that to happen. I think one of the challenges is, if I look at my schedule, right, somebody wants to sell me something, the worst time to try to talk to me is the morning. That's when I have my one-on-ones. That's when I'm trying to set the tone for the day. You have a much better chance of getting me in the afternoon. But if you really want to talk to me about something, you've got to schedule it. Like, everything has become hyper-scheduled. And again, somebody earlier said it's very difficult to connect with people by phone. It is. It's very hard. It was hard before. It's nigh impossible now. So a lot of times you have to ask. And I find that sometimes saying, "Hey, AJ, I've been trying to reach you via email. You got 5 minutes for a quick phone call?" It's so much more personable, and it lets people see, 1, I'm not a robot. 2, I'm going right to my ask, which is a conversation. I promise not to take up more than 5 minutes of your time unless you feel like it's valuable, and we can talk more. But just requesting that, can we jump on a call, I think is something that people don't do enough of. We have become hidden behind so much digital stuff that we have just like it's. I know for me, when I do one-on-ones with my team, I prefer to do it via phone, walking around, than I do sitting in front of the two-dimensional, Zoom Meet or Google Meet or whatever you want to call it.
I agree. I like taking walks and listening to people talk. It's so much more calming for me personally. But there's something to be said about just removing yourself from the thing that you're so very used to and doing a bit of a pattern disrupt. We've talked a lot about how individually as an account executive, you can do things or change what you're currently doing to help fill your own pipeline. On the management side of things, there's also the enablement portion. So Corey, you had brought it up, making sure that your team has the tools and the processes available to them to succeed. Are there any other things that we can be doing from a management perspective to enable our AEs to actually fill their own pipeline? Or is it really kind of almost on them to make sure that they're doing it?
Yeah, it's on management, coaching, and accountability. So coaching, salespeople can only control 2 things: their quality of activity and their quantity of activity. So we've got to observe what's the quantity level, what's the quality level. Is there a coaching opportunity? And then the thing you got to dig one layer deeper on, which a lot of people miss, is that there's different types of challenges that people have that need to be coached. mindset challenges, skill set challenges, activity challenges. So if someone's got a skill set challenge and a mindset challenge, coaching approaches are different. And if you coach a mindset challenge the same way you coach a skill set challenge, it's tough to get buy-in and follow through. So it's about the coaching skills of the team. And then on the accountability piece, what are you going to do? And did you do what you said you were going to do? Are we blocking off time in the calendars and we're actually doing the work during that time? My team, we do a Slack stand-up every day. Like I said, we got 3 salespeople. We've grown from 4 people to 14 people in the last 18 months. So I don't have time to sit there and have like meetings all the time. We don't do meetings. Everything's async. I mean, most of it. We do some meetings. But at the end of the day, what am I going to do tomorrow? Well, I'm going to have these meetings. I'm going to make this many dials. I'm going to send this many emails. I'm going to ask for referrals. I'm going to go to these client meetings. Here's what I'm going to do tomorrow. And then at the end of the next day, here's what I did today. And we can reconcile what did you say you were going to do tomorrow versus what did you actually do? And that creates a closed loop of accountability that takes like 5 minutes a day. And then the discrepancies, the delta there can feed into coaching conversations if people feel like they're either not equipped with the tools or they've got some mindset challenge or they've got some kind of skill set challenge over there. So accountability and coaching on top of that general org-wide enablement, that's what really feeds into helping these people grow and excel.
That's pretty all in. I don't know, Jillian and Rob, if you have anything you want to add to that. That's, I mean, when you really think about it holistically, it's like, yeah, if you can just manage and coach the people correctly, theoretically, they should be able to then execute on the things that they say they would.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one other responsibility management has is what obstacles are you putting in their way without realizing it. You know, you have to do a little bit of a self-checkup and say, am I requiring them to provide me information that's really not valuable for them? You know, is it something that I need to provide up? Is there something that I can do differently to gather that information? You know, how much time do I spend on deal conversations that could be a lot faster? Just that self-check of what are the things I'm asking for that maybe I don't need to.
I agree.
So I was going to say, we talked about this as a group previously, but that process, almost like, and I as a Celtics fan, it hurts for me to say the words trust the process. But the idea behind management knows in a vacuum what should be working. If we put A, B, and C in place and you follow it, you'll get X, Y, Z results. But Rob, to your point, there's got to be sort of that know-how as management to look at your process and see, are we actually enabling our reps to do what they're supposed to be doing? When and why should AEs just blanket trust management to do the right work and put in the correct process when they know that maybe there are roadblocks in place? So I don't know, Jillian, if you can talk a bit to that in terms of like having AEs look at a process and think, I don't know, maybe this isn't working, and having the ability to go to management and talk through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always worked at earlier stage companies, so it's just part of my playbook. You know, we'll put a process in place, either because we've done it before and it works, or we've made an observation. But I think just opening up the door and asking questions like, is there anything you would change? You know, did you expect that this would take you longer or shorter? How can I make it easier? You know, I try to ask almost like every week if there's something that they need that they don't have. You know, what their blockers were for the week, and then I can look for the trends of those blockers, and try to problem solve for them. I mean, that's our job, is to remove the blockers, problem solve for them, use other departments to try to make their jobs easier, and enable them to sell. So that's typically what I do.
And I think, Jillian, just to comment on that, because I said it earlier, but this is a big deal right now, is we are coming out of a change to the way that we work. And it used to be I could watch people, or I would do ride-alongs, and I would see for myself what's happening. And in a lot of cases, like I know in my case, we've hired a lot of people during these last 18, 24 months. They've been existing in a solitary environment, so they haven't necessarily learned best practices from other people. They may be doing things that are, you know, getting in their way of being as productive as possible. They may have interpreted some process away. Like they may be using a spreadsheet where there's something they could have done in the CRM, right? So this is a time where I think as leaders, you really have to examine and spend time with people and see, what are you actually doing? Like, what does your day look like? Not from a, hey, I'm here to get you. It's from a, I'm here to help you. I want to make sure, because it was eye opening. I was in the office 2 weeks ago and listening to some phone calls, and all I could think was, how long have these phone calls been going on? Like, oh my gosh, we have some things we need to fix right away. And then I had 3 different people. I was looking at how they dispositioned calls, and all 3 of them were dispositioning calls differently. I assumed that they were all using things the same way. And I said, oh, why'd you disposition it like that? I go, oh, I got a person on the phone, but I didn't have a good conversation. Meanwhile, somebody else was using the exact same thing for, I got somebody on the phone and I had a good conversation. And I'm like, well, all of my data is flawed because the people putting this stuff in is flawed. And a big piece of it is they just sort of been existing by themselves, and they sort of have figured out how to do things. So I think as leadership, that's another area that is really, really important right now is, you hear people talking about the talent gap and the talent war and how there's not enough talent and all that kind of stuff. Well, you probably have some disaffected talent that has self-created some processes that are frustrating them, and they're doing it in a vacuum. And so, you don't, it's like, I don't know my wife is angry until she yells at me. You want to try to kind of look for the signs that it's coming before you lose your people. And a lot of times it's because they're frustrated with things that they shouldn't be frustrated with, and you just have no idea.
Yeah. There's one, I'll just throw something super tactical out there. There's something that flies below the radar that a lot of people don't see. And that's that there's not a clear way for customer success to feed stories back to sales. And a lot of times the sales team, go into the sales group and say, hey, how many customer stories could you tell me right now that are just very strong customer stories? A whole challenge, solution, impact type thing. And oftentimes they're like 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like, that's not good. We need one for every persona with every use case in every market segment. You build that matrix out, that thing gets pretty robust pretty fast. So just something like that to help the salespeople, whether they're prospecting or working deals, equip them with insight into what pain should they be looking for, with whom, to what extent, and being able to support that with other customer stories you got. Just something like that that's pretty simple. Bridges of communication, and management's uniquely positioned to do that, because you can't expect reps to go up do that on their own, because customer success rep to sales rep, and they don't have time. That's not going to work.
You bring up a point about interdepartmental communication and how important that is. And I think in a lot of cases, what you described isn't 100% always customer success at a lot of companies, but marketing's responsibility, right? It's up to them sometimes to pull those case studies.
CSM knows the story.
They know the story.
So it goes back to marketing, whatever it is. Get it out of the CSM's head, because they're the ones that have it.
Right. So marketing, it's their job to take that story and package it in a way that, it makes sense for sales to use. And I think a lot of organizations don't have that AE to marketing connection existing, where they can easily extract that information in a way that they can take it and then tell the story the way that the company wants them to tell the story, or the way that customers should be hearing the story. So I'm curious, I don't know, at your organizations, in terms of the AEs that you have, what their relationship looks like with marketing, if there is a relationship with marketing, and how that feedback loop, if it even exists, how it works, and how, if an organization doesn't have one, they might be able to implement one to make that easier.
So, something we do, and we have a feedback loop. It's always a challenge of how much is marketing able to take what we do well versus what the market challenges are, get those two into a decent conversation. And it's difficult when marketing is usually giving out what I would call static materials, and we as salespeople are often having a dynamic conversation. So trying to feed that back as much as possible. But what we'll do is we'll have a weekly, what we call top of the funnel meeting, where you've got the lead of the marketing for a specific vertical, the lead of the sales team for that specific vertical, and then the head of the SDR group for that specific vertical. And they'll have a conversation about where's our activity, where's our focus, what's our campaigns and cadences that we're working on, just trying to get everybody aligned as much as possible. So I feel like that meeting stops 9 other meetings from happening, right? So you're not meeting with each person. So I find that to be a pretty decent practice. Now, again, my group uses SDRs. We have SDRs. AEs are responsible for doing some of their own pipeline, or should be. But we're really trying to look at holistically, what's the number of opportunities that are currently in the pipeline. At the end of the day, we don't really care where they come from. What we care about is that they're there. What are some of the best practices and ways that we can do that? So that's one of the things we'll do. We'll also set up meetings where our SDR team will have an hour with a marketing manager and just talk about what they're hearing on the phone and the different things that they're facing. And I think some of our AEs will do some of that too, but we really try to organize it at the SDR level because that's where most of our hangups are. Once we get somebody to have a conversation, things can move along pretty well. The hardest part, and I think everybody faces this, is human beings love the status quo. The way things are is the way we usually see things. So disrupting that is really the job of whoever is prospecting. Like that's when an opportunity is created, when somebody says, "Oh yeah, something in my status quo needs to change." And so anytime you can enable that conversation about what are the things that unlock somebody's desire to at least think about a change to their status quo, that's what you try to do.
I feel like we haven't talked nearly enough about the SDR function during this conversation, because realistically, a lot of orgs, that's their job is to fill the AE's pipeline, whether it's 100%, 50% from the poll that we saw, and that's where a lot of that market intelligence is coming from. Jillian, do you see that happening at LeadIQ? Are you guys leveraging and seeing SDRs do a lot of that and helping AEs learn what they have to learn about their audience and the customer base to enable them to have the right conversations?
Yeah, I mean, anyone that knows me knows I love SDR orgs. I love building them. I love hiring SDRs. I love seeing those SDRs get promoted and stay at companies for a really long time and be top performers. And I think what a lot of people who maybe have never worked directly with SDR teams forget is that they typically know the most. They're getting the most feedback about the product. They're understanding the personas the most because they're talking to such a high volume of them. And so the other thing is that I would say it's not a one size fits all. I've seen organizations use SDRs in different ways. I've seen them be, meeting setters. I've seen them be researchers. I've seen them do a pretty large part of like medic qualification and then pass the opportunity off. So I think it's just about remembering that they're a huge component of having really strong pipeline. And if you're utilizing that role correctly, it'll be a positive impact on your revenue at the end of each year.
Yeah, it sounds, Corey, to a story that you told earlier, that your team, you have those dedicated specialized roles. One's for research. That kind of, to Jillian's point, like that's kind of a component of what an SDR does. So maybe it goes back a bit to that specialization aspect, where it's like if you can specialize and have reps that can feed that market intelligence up to the right team and then enable AEs, this whole thing just becomes a lot easier for them.
Yeah, so we do management consulting with sales teams, and part of what we do is SDRs have written a couple of books on sales development, and we consistently see leadership frustrated with individual people because they're either not doing research or they're not making dials or whatever. And to think in this world that, oh yeah, they have to do all the jobs because I had to do all the jobs when I was in their role. I just think that's a little outdated and backwards. And I think that when it comes to sales development, I firmly believe sales development reps only have two purposes. Their first purpose is to keep the AE's calendar full. And the second is to create an internal talent pipeline for future AEs. And that's it. And so when it goes to the degree of qualification, Jillian touched on that. If your AE's calendars are really, really, really full, then the SDR should do more qualification. If the AE calendars are really, really, really empty, then they should flip over any warm body that'll accept a conversation, given that you gave them good data and have them reach out to people that are in your target market of your target personas. And then you're rolling. But being able, and then being able to flex on that, depending what AE bandwidth looks like, is what great leadership can do. Everything else running well. You got people in the right roles and they got to want to do the job. If they don't want to do the job, get them out of there. I'm going to do something else. You can get a job doing anything these days. Lack of talent in the market.
Talent gap.
Go do what you want to do, and don't force yourself to do something because you think somebody else wants you to do it. So, I don't know.
Life lessons with Corey Ray. You bring up a good point, though.
Conversation with my family later, because I've always wanted to be a cowboy. So maybe you're right.
Now's the time.
What I should be, or a pirate. Pirate would be a lot of fun too.
One of those are more ethical than the others, but hey, you do you, Rob. You did bring up a good point earlier, Corey, in what you were just saying, that I mean, hey, if your calendar as an AE is full, like, what's the problem here? Like, there are definitely some account executives out there who they have back to back to back to back to back meetings. They don't have an hour in their day to do anything but maybe eat lunch. So the question comes up: should every single AE out there be doing their own cold prospecting?
Not if their calendar's full, they should be closing deals. But like I said earlier, the AEs can only control two things: their quality of activity and their quantity of activity. So if their calendar's full, quantity is solved for. So now it's about quality. And if you got an extra 30 minutes a day, I'd spend that doing call reviews and looking at your execution as opposed to just doing something else, which is prospecting, given that you have enough pipeline to be able to, if your calendar's full, you've got enough pipeline. Otherwise, you work at the wrong company.
I was gonna say, I would also just warn to pay attention to that, because your calendar could be full, but you're not generating any pipeline from it. And so you've always got to think about the end goal and work backwards from that and make sure those conversions, like make sure if you have a stat calendar, it's turning into pipeline, you're having deal progression calls. It's the waterfall pipeline. We've all seen AEs, or we've probably all been there, that, you know, you maybe have a month or two where you're stacked with meetings, you're closing a ton of deals, and you get to the third month and you go, crap, because you don't have enough pipeline. Or you enter a new quarter after 2xing your quota the previous quarter and you go, shoot, now what? So that's why it's always like, you got to sometimes hit the pause button, look at the bigger picture, like from a 30,000 foot view, and say, okay, what's my annual pipeline right now? What's my quarterly pipeline? What's next quarter look like? Then you can really try to figure out, like, okay, in that 30 minutes I have free this week, where should I be spending my time?
Jillian, one quick point on that. If your calendar is completely full and you're doing great now and you're worried about the future, the first place I'd go for more pipeline is not cold outreach. It's referrals.
Totally.
Either people that we sold to or that we disqualified but still like us. Like, they're first and then do the other stuff.
That's still outbound prospecting.
I know. I was just clarifying because you were making a point. I was just layering on top of it.
What's interesting about that, Corey, is I was about to say it way earlier and I stopped myself, but with the changes to organizations where you now have CSM functions, those CSM functions often own the long-term relationship now with the client. So suddenly that ability to get referrals, like I sell them net new, I give them over to CSM and I go find another net new. We have taken away a lot of times the connection that account executive would have had through the process of actually changing the status quo. That's something to really be looking at. You mentioned CSMs and marketing talking. You need AEs and CSMs to talk about what were the lessons learned during this implementation. You should make sure you're doing a 30, 60, 90 look back at everybody you sell for what the implementation looks like. What was the wins? What were the losses? Where did we struggle? So that, one, you can have a better implementation on the next person you sell, but also make sure as a sales rep, you're connecting with those people you sold so that you can circle in at day 120 and say, hey, is there anybody else in your industry that you can think of that I should be talking to? I'm like, you're building that referral the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah. You have to get intentional about it because most organizations have taken it away. Like, it's probably a better client experience. It's a much more challenging salesperson experience.
Yeah. So maybe the question isn't so much are account executives leveraging their own networks and referrals, but are they even allowed to, is sort of the quote unquote there within their organization. And I think recently a lot of that has been mitigated, might be the right word, by personal branding, and a lot of it going around, hey, look, if I'm an account executive and I have 30 extra minutes during the day, to your point, Corey, what's to stop me from maybe going on LinkedIn and commenting on some influencers in my network and getting my name out there and starting to build up my name and sort of the attachment to my company through those connections, so that maybe you're not necessarily asking for referrals, but you're putting yourself out there enough and garnering attention to the point where someone comes to you totally cold out from there. So it's a bit of a different pool to dip into, but kind of a similar idea in that you're leveraging your network there. I don't know what you guys have to say about that, if you're fans of the whole personal brand movement or not.
Sort of, I guess. I don't know. It's funny because as I was getting ready to do this today, I'm like, oh, I got to put on a suit coat. That's part of my brand. And, it's where does the branding stop and selling begin? A lot depends on what your product is, right? If you're selling a tool that helps other salespeople, then yeah, being around influencers and doing that kind of stuff, that's important. But if I'm selling something to a niche market, me commenting on what Jeb Blunt says isn't going to help me get the attention of the people I'm selling to. So how do you balance that thought? How do you become a thought leader within the vertical that you actually sell to? As well as, I mean, I get it. We do live in the social network world where what people think of you and that kind of stuff, that's important. That is something that a lot of people take very, very seriously. And so it's a fine balance, right? So you want to be able to do both. But, if as a sales leader in the confines of the day, I'm like, build your brand as a leader in our vertical market. In the evening, build your brand. All you want as a sales rep,
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. The people that win the most in the personal branding space are the people that are selling personal branding consulting services and online courses. And those are the ones the people that really want you to build a personal brand, I guarantee they have an online course or they're trying to do something, whatever. I've written 8 books. I've sold 40,000 copies. We sell to sales leaders. 15% of the time when one of my salespeople closes a deal, they know who I am. And I'm posting on LinkedIn every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not a thing because it's an echo chamber. Oh yeah, everyone at Lead IQ knows everyone at XYZ company knows everyone at Sales Hacker. Yes, 100% absolutely agree. However, the world is large. And outside of that confines of the people that LinkedIn sees that you always look at their things and always comment on their things and whatever, nobody knows who you are. It's 325, 350 million people in the US. And I'm just saying, I'm not trying to brag about whatever I've done. I've done a lot of things that have gotten content and my name out there and nobody knows who I am.
What do you think, Jillian, as the named company in Corey's example?
I agree. I think it's just having your personal brand isn't going to make you hit $1 million quota for the year. It's like you have to do your job still.
It might get you some meetings.
Yeah, exactly. It might get you some meetings, might get you some referrals. It's going to aid in it. It's not going to be the only thing that gets it done. There's a whole other part of the job that you got to do.
Good point. I think it's a lot of feel-good activity, right? Like if you get out there and you post on LinkedIn and you get 42 likes or whatever, it's like, wow, this resonated with people. But I think, to your point, Corey, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really do a whole lot for you other than maybe that little hit of serotonin.
Yeah, which is what it's designed to do.
Yeah, true.
I'm having a lot of fun talking with 3 very intelligent people today. Not one of you will ever buy the product I sell. Ever. Unless you go back to med school and there's something about your past or future that I don't know, there is no chance. But this is fun.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Markets, territories, whatever we're going to be doing a year or 2 from now. And the only reason I invested in the personal brand thing is because I'm going to have this business for a long time. I've had it for a long time. I will have it for a long time. If I was doing a job that I want to get promoted from in 2 years, just focus on being really, really, really good at that. And just, every minute, here's the advice I give to salespeople. Every minute you want to fool around on LinkedIn, that's cool. Does it replace Netflix time? I'm fine with that. It's entertaining. However, if you're doing it to get better at your job, go schedule one-on-ones with customer success managers to work with your actual customers, people that buy your stuff all day, every day, and go deep. Schedule time with customers. Go take a class or whatever it is. There's so many things in this world that you can go deep on and become an absolute expert at. And that's what's going to unlock earning potential, not because some VP of sales I saw your post on LinkedIn. I think you're funny. Let's have a conversation. That's not going to do it. And it might make you a couple $100 in commission. Who knows?
I think you're funny. That's funny. So I think wrapping the conversation up to sort of larger scale points, what you said, Corey, if you're an account executive and you want to do your own cold outbound or you want to fill your own funnel, feed yourself, one of the things you should be doing is leveraging what you currently have internally to learn more about your market, your audience, and just get better at your job so that when you do your outbound, it's more efficient. That was just one thing I pulled from what we've talked about. If you guys could wrap up everything we've said into sort of large scale points for anyone listening to take away and think, I should be doing my own cold outbound, and this is how, and this is why, what would they be? Anyone can jump in. I know it's a big ask.
It is, but it's it is sort of a piece of just do it. Make sure you're actually flexing that muscle. It's like any muscle. So many people, when they first start in sales, they have no choice but to prospect. They also are a lot of times curious because they don't know everything. Once you've been doing it for a while, I think people have a tendency to rush the process. So if you're a sales rep and you're trying to prospect, what's going to happen is you're going to get to the end result a lot faster than some of your prospects will, because you can see the problems they have and they haven't made it for the whole journey. And so you're going to end up losing people along the way. It's going to make you more desperate. You're going to try to, squash that and keep working that as opposed to finding the time to prospect. So really challenge yourself on how are those conversations? What does that journey look like? Are you able to step back and be curious about what somebody is dealing with? And you talk about the how piece, the curiosity to me, when you become more, when you've been doing something for a while, you become less curious. Check yourself on that. And then again, we talked a lot about the time management is you have to make the time. It has to be intentional. It cannot be an afterthought. It has to be a big piece of what you do every single day.
Well said.
I would say, to summarize, it's have a plan, execute the plan. You can't go in blind. You have to have a plan for your closing, for your deal progression, for your prospecting, and understand how each of those puzzle pieces fits together. And speak up if you don't have what you need or you have blockers. Use your resources around you. That's your leadership team's job to help you.
Yep. So I'd say along the lines of what Jillian said, you got to work backwards from the end state. My favorite Yogi Berra quote is, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. So where are you going? If you're an AE and you're prospecting, okay, I need to hold 10 meetings a month. What's my no-show rate? 20%? Okay, cool. So I've got to book 12 meetings a month. How many dials do I need to make to book 12 meetings a month? Over the course of a month. Cool. How many is that a day? And then emails and then social touches, whatever that is. And then how can I hold myself accountable and block off my time? So I've got time management and accountability. Boom. And then if my conversion rates don't hold, or if they start fluctuating up and down, whatever, how do I inspect the quality? Because salespeople can only control two things, the quality of activity and the quantity of activity. So we got quantity figured out there. How do we inspect the quality and then work with our manager on coaching opportunities? Because if we're not looking at it from that perspective, we're just doing stuff, it ain't gonna work.
I think the word that all of you probably brought up at some point during the conversation is intention. And I think that's the big thing here, right? Is if you're an AE and you're part of your calendar is being booked by SDRs, great. You've got to fill the other 50% of it. If you're just doing the job to do the job and hope that you hit quota every month, you're never going to succeed. But if you're intentional about doing the job and getting the resources in place and using everything you have, and you actually care about it, that's kind of the big component, then it's going to be a lot easier for you. And I think a lot of AEs, when they do fall short, maybe they don't care as much. Maybe they forgot how difficult prospecting is, even though they probably just did it 9 months ago as an SDR. There's a lot that mentally, roadblock-wise, exists within the role. And if you can push through that, I think you're better set up for success.
I got one more thing. So I was telling someone this the other day. There's all these companies that think they're product-led growth. I'm partnered in angel funds too, so we work with a lot of founders that are coming in trying to get funding. And a lot of people are like, oh, we're going to be product-led. Well, it might work for very few of them. It's not going to work at scale. They're still going to need a sales team. So if you want to go find someplace that you can just crush it with inbound leads, go find one of these companies that's like Series A-ish that thought they were product-led. They got tons of inbound leads just sitting around for you to ready to rock and roll. So that's the go find a job hack of the day from CB.
Love it. Awesome. This was a great conversation. I loved. We had fun. I think we learned a lot. If anyone had any last points that they want to make, I think now would be the time. Someone give you a thank you, Corey, in the comments there for that.
I think one thing I would say, Jillian said it earlier, but without that intentionality, your best case scenario as a sales rep is to porpoise your way through the year. I have good stuff, then I dive down, I got a prospect, bring it back up, then I dive down. And that's a very, very stressful existence. That's not a lot of fun. And so if you're intentional, you have a fighting chance to at least be on the top of the wave, or at least control the ebb and the flow a lot more. So if I had one piece of advice for anybody, it's just that: be intentional and put a priority, because if you're prospecting, you'll always have deals to close, which is what we really like to do. But you got to prospect to have those deals to close.
Oh, we actually just got a last second question in here. We got 4 minutes left. Might as well ask you guys. Is it a good use of an AE's time to cold call, or should it be outsourced to an SDR? What do you like value-wise SDR organizations and how they impact the account executive role? I guess I don't even want to like 1 to 10 scale it, but like importance-wise for the growth of a company overall, where do the SDRs sit in terms of that?
I think, in my opinion, a lot depends on who that prospect is. If it's a prospect that you have some data on that you feel like is pretty, not hot to trot, but could move quicker, you're better off having an AE working on it. If it's somebody that's pretty raw, or you don't have a lot of information on, or is really new to your organization and just needs exposure, I think you're better off with an SDR investing that time personally.
So basically just where they sit funnel-wise.
I think so. I think there's probably some of that. Engagement-wise, right? Like somebody who's been heavily engaged or really fits nicely, AE. Somebody who, there's some questions about SDR, because there's so much nurture that has to happen before you can really validate if that's somebody you can sell to. Sorry, I'll pause and let somebody else speak up too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just all in SDR. The thing that I always come back to is, are SDRs going to be promoted into AEs, and does that create a competitive advantage for your sales team? And the answer is no. Then ask yourself, step back and say, can I throw another $20K a month into Google AdWords? Can I run more trade shows? Can I get bigger booths at trade shows? Can I get a send them something product? Can I get on a plane and go do a local event and take this person to lunch along with some other people and some customers? There's so many things. If we're just saying we need to get leads and meetings, there's a million things that we can do with that cash. And unless SDRs are a strategic function to build the future sales team inside your business, then everything's on the table. And it just depends on what's worked in the past and where you see the biggest impact from those budget dollars.
Interesting. Almost pitting sales and marketing against each other in that sense. It's like, hey, look, if you've got cash, do you want to go into SDRs and then, like you said, move them into AEs, or marketing? I
posted a job for 3 SDRs 3 months ago, and then I stepped back and I said, okay, so I've got this much money to spend. I ended up spending, I spent the budget. I'm spending as much as I would have on 3 SDRs, on a couple marketing campaigns, and on some technology. And I made the decision that is going to have a bigger impact on our business. And I didn't believe that in my business right now, given where we're at, bringing people from an SDR level to an AE is something I'm going to be able to do in a year. So that's just what decision I made. And I think it was the right one.
Yeah, it totally depends on the business.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like we have any more questions, so I think we can wrap this bad boy up. But thank you, all of you, for being here. I had a blast moderating the discussion. Not really sure how we should sign off if everyone Sam's coming back, saving me.
Can we do a plug?
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. This was incredible. For anyone who's wondering, we're going to be sending out the recording so that you can watch this again. And I just appreciate all of you, all the panelists, for being here. And thank you to all the attendees. We'll see you next time.